Good afternoon, everybody. So this is Automate the REST. I'm actually going to, unlike the way I normally am, I'm going to try to get started right away because we have a lot of stuff to cover today. So I'm going to jump right in. My name is Ken Duranzio, and they gave me a really big room, so I'm a little freaked out. But if we close the doors and lock them, maybe we can just limit how many people are in here, so I don't, I can make it through. No, I'm just playing around. This is going to be fun. So this is Automate the REST. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I've been working with FileMaker for a while, like a lot of us have here. And I'm that guy who says yes and then tries to figure out how I'm going to actually fit these pieces together to make it work. And what's fun about that is it actually puts me into this place where I play in the intersection of what's possible in sort of native FileMaker without getting into the web browser and all the technologies underneath that. And then finding out, right, okay, so if I start plugging in some JavaScript here and some PHP here and HTML5 here, we can actually start really expanding what FileMaker can do. And so that's where I like to spend a lot of my time. I'm a partner at Paradise Partners, certified in FileMaker 16 recently, and a lead developer of So Simple Calendar. We have a booth here in the exhibit area. And part of this year has been spent converting So Simple Calendar to start using some of the REST API. And that's where we started really digging our teeth into this. I forgot I actually had a clicker. I don't need to keep on walking back and forth. So part of that, what was actually fun about that is that we were able to create a class file. We call it FM, I should have put it down on there. It's called FM rest.php. And if you go to the So Simple website, we're giving away this class file that is intended to ease the transition from people who are developing in PHP to start using the REST engine. So it allows you to call, it manages tokens and calls REST functions from within your PHP file. So you can check that out. What we're going to try to do today, however, is we're going to start talking about REST as an automation tool. We're going to, the demo that we're going to get into a little bit later, we're going to use Zapier. We're going to talk about other options too. And we're going to talk about how you can use FileMaker as sort of a hub and a gateway to interact with other web services to do a complete automation of your entire workflow. And then we're going to talk about why you may not actually want to do that. And we're going to talk a little bit about security too. So REST is really cool. Working with FileMaker and REST, you can connect to Internet of Things devices. How many people here were at my session last year on Internet of Things? OK, we got a few people. So last year, we did something sort of similar to this session. We actually did use some Zapier stuff last year. We also used IFT. And what we did last year was we connected, I actually had a little, I had a bunch of internet devices up here, and I flashed lights and took photographs and stuff like that using Internet of Things. REST allows you to do that much more securely and much more reliably and much more consistently than we could do it last year with the web engine. And I proposed that session too. They didn't take me up on the IoT portion of that, so I'm just going to do the web services portion. So we can also connect to web services. We're going to do a lot of that today. We're going to talk a lot about the full automation piece of this. It can also be used for connecting to vertical market apps. A lot of vertical market apps are starting to support integration with REST. And so FileMaker can talk directly to those. So let me talk a little bit. I know this, we're talking a lot about REST this year. I swear like half the sessions are something to do with REST. Or if not about REST, then about curl and JSON. So let me talk a little bit about what it is. I'm going to try to go fairly quick over this part because you've probably heard it before, but if you need more information. So the other thing is we're going to save Q&A for the end, but so some things I'm going to bullet through. If you have any questions at the end, please come to the microphone and I'll try to answer as best I can. So what is REST? REST stands for representational state transfer. What it does, it uses URLs in a consistent way and HTTP methods to pass data back and forth with other web services. So let me talk about those methods. The HTTP methods, how many here have ever gone into a web browser and typed in an internet address and pressed return? Wow, really? Come on. I'm hoping a few more than you have done that. When you've done that and you press that return button, what you're using is the get method. Okay, the get method simply goes and retrieves information without with a very generic sort of wrapper around it. That's the get method. How many of you, and I need an honest answer this time, how many people have gone to a web form, typed in their email address or some other private information, and then pressed submit? Wow, more people have done that than have browsed the web. So you've used the post method. More than likely, when you've submitted that form, you use post to get there. Okay, and if you've dug underneath the hood a little bit, and I know we have a broad range of experience here. If you've gone underneath the hood a little bit with HTML, you've probably had to choose when you created that form whether you're going to use the post method or the get method. There are two other ones that are used very commonly with REST, and that's put and delete. So let's talk about it. So those are the generic methods. And so what we're talking about are the generic methods that REST uses. Now, the generic URLs that REST uses. So we're talking about a collection of resources. We're going to go to URL, HTTP, just a generic thing, and what it's ending in a slash, and that is accessing resources. So let's use an example of FileMaker records, or let's say WordPress blog entries. A list of those would be considered a collection, and then each one would be an element in that collection. So if you were to do a get method against that resource, you would get the entire list of the collection. So the entire list of FileMaker records in a table, for example. If you use the post method, you would be creating a new member for that collection against that URL. Some of these you use less frequently than others. You might want to delete an entire collection. And then you get into the individual resource. You can see it's the same exact URL appended with an ID. And that ID is identifying that specific record in FileMaker, or that specific blog post in WordPress, or that specific entry inside PayPal, or whatever it is. And the get would give more information about that. The post, which is not usually used, might be used for creating sub-collections. And the put might update, we're calling a member, it might update that record, for example. And a delete would delete that record. So it's you sort of see the consistency of this. This is really great news, because now whenever you're developing against any of these APIs for other services besides FileMaker, the REST API looks almost the same. This is the way FileMaker does it. And so these are the exact APIs, URLs that FileMaker uses. And this is documented. I'll show you the documentation in a second. But notice the grayed out ones, we're not using those. These are the 5 verbs that we're using when we're addressing records in FileMaker. There are a few other things you can do in FileMaker besides this, but we're talking records right now. And so that URL, the very first one, we get a list of all the records, and so on. So you'd create a new record, you would get a specific record, edit a specific record, or delete a record. Today, so this is what we're focusing on today. We're not going to go through all of them. This is not really a tutorial. It's more of a it's sort of a combination between a case study and sort of an informational session about how these things interact. So I'm not getting into all the details about all the methods, but I'm going to talk about those 2 methods. This is the FileMaker documentation. If you've installed FileMaker Server 16, you have it on your server. That's the URL to get there. And you'll start recognizing immediately there's the URL that I had in the previous slide, right below where it says post. And what's highlighted is the create record step. So that corresponds directly. OK, I'm actually already behind schedule, so I'm going to start speaking really quickly. I think that's the answer, right? Just go quick? Yeah. So, OK, so REST versus custom web publishing. We've had custom web publishing for years. What's great about custom web publishing is, what's great about REST? So custom web publishing has been around for years. Why did FileMaker introduce REST? What's so great about it? A lot of it has to do with this speaking the same language, starting to get to the same language so that outside developers who don't know FileMaker can start talking to FileMaker. Right? So there's an API that is going to be immediately recognizable by anybody who's ever used REST. We're passing records with JSON. It's a structured URL. It's more secure because we're token-based, which means that you never pass user information in the URL. You're not passing records in the URL. Everything happens in the header and in the data portion of your records. What's also really cool is you can use JavaScript and never even touch a PHP file or a server-side scripting file. You can go directly from a web browser page, get information from your FileMaker server, come back, and never have to touch anything like PHP. What's also cool is you can use PHP if you want, right? So you can, it's compatible with any kind of development language that can make web calls. REST is in its infancy. The implementation of REST in FileMaker is in its infancy. So there's a few things it can't do yet. I'm sure you've heard some of those. Anybody who went to the Under the Hood session earlier today, these were all covered. It can't yet run FileMaker scripts. It's on the FileMaker roadmap. In fact, most of these things, FileMaker knows about all of these things, and some of them are on the roadmap, some of them are not. So you can't retrieve FileMaker metadata like value lists and layout information. And it's also in a trial implementation. And I don't know if this actually came up in that meeting. And so the fee structure we haven't been told what the new fee structure is going to be in a year. And so just sort of considerations if you start really doing a lot of development in this new environment. There are also a few more technical things, like it relies on the FileMaker's internal record ID, which may change if you export your file and then re-import it, for example. And there are a few other little things like that. Okay. So FileMaker as a team player. I like this notion that FileMaker is a web service. Like FileMaker Server can be a web service on the internet, just like PayPal is, just like Dropbox is, just like Slack is. We're just a peer. We're sitting out in the cloud just like everybody else, if that's the way you set up your server. You know, a lot of us are behind firewalls. But if you set up your server on the internet, you can be a peer just like everybody else. And so now you're a web service. The bottom half of this, each one of those arrow points is going to be one of the things I'm going to be discussing. The bottom half is using REST to go back and forth to push FileMaker records, to pull information from FileMaker. And the upper half is using a FileMaker script to push records. So that's what we're going to be talking about. A typical REST call. The first thing you need to do, you checked into the hotel earlier. When you checked in, you had to, well, I don't know about here, but sometimes you got to provide an ID and say, this is really who I am, and they're going to give you a key to your room. That's all we're doing. We're exchanging our username and password, proving who we are. They're going to give us a token, and then every time we go in and out of our room, we're going to use that token to read or write from FileMaker records. I know I'm mixing metaphors, but that's what that is, right? And so, in FileMaker, you can also do other things, but what I was describing before is the generic create, read, update, delete stands for, it's CRUD is what the acronym is, and that's for updating records. Setting up FileMaker Server, you need to have a secure certificate. You need to be over HTTPS. You enable the data API in the admin console. Each database that needs to be accessed needs to have the REST, FM REST extended privilege set for that. I'm not going to go into the detail about all of this, but I'll show you. And if you are using OAuth, you also need a gateway page, which I'm not going to get into either. But suffice it to say that if you end up using OAuth, I would go to Todd Geist's website, Geist Interactive, and they've developed a wonderful gateway page that would help you do OAuth authentication. And I just went through how the calling service works. And the other method I was describing is using scripts, and that's the same as we used to do, but with more control. It's just the insert from URL script step, only now we have the ability to add headers and add data using curl support. And to set up our demo a little bit, this is what we got. We got the automation game. We're going to try to automate this entire company in the next, I think I only have 5 minutes left for the demo, but so the automation game, we had a widget company. They produce widgets automatically. So the first thing the customer does is they go to their website and they submit their information, and that's just a lead. I'm just saying I'm interested, I want to know more information. So we might go into FileMaker and create a contact record. And how many of people here are familiar with what a drip is? You ever heard of a drip? Okay, so a drip is it's pretty simple. It's just a series of emails that keep on coming at you until you either say, I give up, don't send me any more emails, or I'm going to buy. And there are systems out there that automate these drip processes, and we're going to use one of those web services. And so after the drip stops, the customer might purchase. We have to process a credit card. We have to create a job record, then we might need more information, and then we start setting up the job, import that information, check that information. And what I'm trying to sort of illustrate is these are all, when you start really automating a system, these are all the types of things you can start taking into consideration that we're going to automate the entire process, because what the widget company is interested in is processing things as quickly as they can to get through the job and move on to the next one. Fortunately, I'm not really going to automate the whole thing today. I'm just going to focus on one little piece of it because I don't have time. The potential customer submits a form on a website. We're going to create a contact record in FileMaker, and we're going to start an automated drip using a web service called drip.co. Before I get into the demo, I just want to point out, so we're using Zapier for this demonstration. There are a handful of other tools. There are actually a lot of tools that act as a gateway to this type of process. There are a handful of other tools. These are the ones that we were able to find in our couple days of looking for them. What all of these tools have in common is that they all have a library of other web APIs that they know how to communicate with. And you'll see that as soon as I pop into Zapier. What that means is that they can, well, you know what? You're going to see. I'm going to actually illustrate it. It's easier. So these are the three things we're going to do. We're going to create a record from Zapier to FileMaker based on something happening on the web. So a form will be submitted, and we're going to create a record in FileMaker. We're going to see if there are new records that have been created in FileMaker, and we're going to start a drip campaign as a result. And then just as a follow-up, we're going to do an insert from URL just to sort of show that it can be done another way. It's actually the same exact end result for that last piece. Oop, but no, we're not there yet, sorry. All right, this is 2:30. All right, so just real quickly, the tools we're going to be using. This is the generic starter solution, that the one that comes with FileMaker. I added one field, which is created, and it's just a timestamp field of the creation date. And I also set up the security so that that's the only thing that's really important for our demo today, is that FM REST extended API is assigned to full access and data entry. A little quick introduction to Zapier, how it works. How many people here have ever used Zapier? Okay, so it's new to a lot of you. And how many have used other automation tools like Zapier, maybe from that last page? Okay. It's once you start playing around with it, it's amazing the kind of things you can do. So on the left, what you're seeing here, not the same resolution, but what you're seeing here is a trigger on the top and an action on the bottom. So what happens is, on the on the top part of this, something happens on Gravity Forms. A new form submission comes in on my Gravity Forms in WordPress. Okay, so Gravity Forms is just a little tool that lets me put forms in WordPress. When that happens, this action is going to be taken. In this example, an email is going to be sent. And it's going to, and that email, what's cool about all these tools is that you can then embed information from the action from the trigger into the action. So when that's sent, it's going to be sent to the email that was provided by that form submission. And it's going to say thank you to their first name and hi first last, blah, 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 that kind of stuff. So that's generically how that works. Now what I want to do is I want to have FileMaker in the middle. I don't want to just send them an email. I actually want to create a record in FileMaker first and then act on that because, first of all, it's part of the demo. Good enough reason right there. But also because people might, you might want to create the record from within FileMaker not having come from the form initially, and you still want future actions, you want the emails to start being sent from there. So I'm just going to click Make a Zap. I'm going to set up the form. Start a Gravity form. Try to do this part quickly. And what it does, it gives me a little hook, and I go to my Zapier form setup, and I add a new Zapier feed. with the internet gods working with me. Yes. And I put that hook that they gave me in here, and this is going to go to FileMaker. And that's all I really need to do. And so what happens on the other end now is I go back over here. I say, OK, I did this. And Gravity Forms, Zapier and Gravity Forms, they're now talking to each other. It's checking to see if there are any form submissions. It found something. And this is a sample record that Gravity Forms puts in, and it says Bilbo Baggins is the name, and has all this information. So that's now done. It worked. Now what I want to do is I want to send that information to FileMaker. So just to understand what this is actually a gateway that I created mostly for the purpose of this demo. When I'm done with this demo, I'll give you a website that you can actually download this and use it. I encourage everybody, if you want to play around with this, fill out the form, send me an email, I'll send you information to use it. I want to turn this into a public gateway and make it more robust. So this is actually a tool that allows Zapier to be a gateway between FileMaker and all your web services. I'll show you what went into developing it as part of it. That's sort of why I'm here. But I wanted to also point out that you're going to get this for free. So inside this gateway is this action called create a FileMaker record. And the first thing I need to do is connect to my database. So I'm going to go to my database, which was on my staging server. And the file name is contacts. The username was admin. I can't tell you the password, it's a secret. The layout was contact details. And there's also asking for a timestamp field. Now, what's also cool is it's actually going to test this. It's going to go to FileMaker and try to grab the last record and see if it connects, and it does. And if it doesn't, it's going to give me an error and tell me what the error is. It'll say something like that field doesn't exist or that layout doesn't exist. So now I'm going to keep going, save and continue. Oh, I should show you what the test looked like over here. Let me actually go back to FileMaker. You can see that record. Oh, that's not it. Sorry, James. OK. And maybe the test didn't actually create a record. OK, so now I'm going to put in the field names. These are the field names in FileMaker that I want to populate. The first field name is first. Then there's last. Then there's office email. And the last one is notes. I want to populate that with first is first. And so now it's, again, looking back at the form submission to see what these fields are. And maybe I want to put in form information from, I'll type in from Zapier so I know where it came from, and continue. OK, so this is what it's going to send. I'm going to say create and continue. That's when it creates it. I gotcha. So now if I go back to FileMaker, we should see a new record created that's Bilbo Baggins, office email, and from Zapier sample value. Right? OK, so this is now being created. I'm going to call this FM from form. I'm going to turn it on and take a look at it. And now it's sitting here. So now, anytime, I'm actually going to turn this one off because I don't need this one anymore. So now, anytime someone goes to our website and fills out this form, Ken Demo is going to fill it out this time. Demo. OK, so now when I submit this form, we should immediately, I just typed in going great, and it's Ken Demo is the person. So if I go to FileMaker now, you should see a new record that says Ken Demo, DevCon going great. That was Zapier posting right to FileMaker. Thank you. But wait, there's more. So I want to show, before I actually show the other half of this, I want to sort of go under the hood because I am running out of time, hopefully I'll get to the other half of this, but I do want to really dig under the hood for a sec so you can see how this was created. Oh, wait. I'm not running out of time. I'm good. I have until 3:15, right? Oh, I'm doing fine. I don't need to rush. Oh. Okay. Here, I put a clock right here, and I'm thinking it's counting down to 3. Good. Okay. So where's my thing? Development. I can relax a little bit. So this is what we created. So what we did, I don't know if you caught it, there actually was underneath, within Zapier, there's a section called Developers. Anybody can go ahead and do this. There's some things you can do very generically right within the Zapier interface, and there's some things you need to dig under the hood a little bit to do. So the first thing I did, you'll recognize these fields immediately probably. These are the things that it asked you for as soon as I said create an account. It asked me for the host, the file name, the username, the password, the layout, and the timestamp field. You'll see why the timestamp field in a little bit. This is the create FileMaker record step that I just ran. So I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to say, just take a look at what it is. So it says create FileMaker record. That's where that text came from when I chose it. And there's probably a description on what it does somewhere down here. Creates a new FileMaker record. The next thing it does is it asks me what fields do I want to send to FileMaker. This was a little bit tricky when I was developing this because I really was thinking about you guys when I did this. I wanted to create something that I could give away and that you could apply to any database. I could have hard-coded in the fields that I wanted to write to here, but what I really wanted to do was set up a gateway that you could write to any database. So what I did was it really was very simple after I figured out the terminology for it. What I did was I created a key field called, or a key record called data. And I defined it, instead of doing it as a Unicode or a text or a number or anything like that, I defined it as a dictionary object. Come on, internet gods, work with me. There you go. Okay. That dictionary object is this. All right, so what I'm basically saying to Zapier is when you push this, create a dictionary on the fly, and that's where it prompted me for the names. What's the first name, last name, email, and I typed in those field names myself when I set it up. And so that corresponds to this data record is a dictionary, and the dictionary is formatted like this. And this is one of the beautiful things about REST. It's consistent, and so Zapier speaks REST, and so its data record consists of field name followed by value, field name followed by value, field name followed by value, and so on. And so that whole mechanism is just defined by saying, wrong place, is just defined by saying data is the name, and the type is dictionary. And Zapier prompted me for the rest. Zapier prompted me for the rest of all the field names and the detail. The next thing I had to do is say, where am I going to send that data? And that's frankly even simpler, because that was right in one of my first screens. It uses these wildcards based on all that information I collected from you at the very beginning. It uses these wildcards called host and file name and layout and constructs the URL to push to FileMaker. And it's using the post method automatically, so I don't need to do anything special there. So I'm basically posting a record to what we called earlier the collection URL. And that's basically it. There's a very little bit we had to do under the hood. I'll show you in a little bit, but that's essentially what was involved in creating that piece of it. There are two other pieces that I created. One is the get records, and the other one is record received. Get records, they both do the same thing. The goal is to get FileMaker data into Zapier so that when something happens, Zapier can take an action. The get records, it polls FileMaker for new changes. I love that because it means that FileMaker doesn't have to be sitting there running a script every 5 minutes pushing data to Zapier. Instead, we have Zapier saying, hey, is there anything new? And there's a little bit of magic in that. The magic in that is that Zapier needs to know what it's already done work on, what records it's already touched. So it actually can keep track of the record ID And what I had to do in order to do that, let's go in here, it's record. The whole trick with that was, keep on doing that. The whole trick with that was when I posted to it, I'm trying to see if I can get that on screen without, there we go. So the whole trick with that is that when you send the REST, it's the same exact REST URL. This is a collection URL. It's a get command, so I'm going to get members from the record. And I'm going to add a parameter to it. This is a FileMaker specific parameter. I can add a sort parameter. And I'm going to say I'm sorting by my timestamp field. And that's the only reason why I wanted a timestamp field from you. I wanted to find out when you created that record. And so now I can sort by that in descending order, so I know that the first records I get are new. And then Zapier does the rest by figuring out which, based on the ID, which ones it's already processed. Yes, it'll collect more than one. It'll collect it'll find all the ones that haven't been collected, that haven't been processed. The records received is actually, from this side, is much, much simpler. It's called a static webhook. And that was the same sort of thing. I did it very, very quickly, but when I set up the Gravity web form, they gave me a URL, and I went into Gravity to post to that URL. It's the same sort of thing. It sets up a static webhook. It gives you a URL. You go back into FileMaker and give it that URL, and I'll show you that. I think I'll have time to show you that still. I did want to show you one bit under the hood. Here's where the under the hood part of Zapier comes in. Don't be overwhelmed. It's not as bad as it looks. Okay. This is their scripting language. It's all JavaScript. I did have to do a couple of fancy things to make this work. The main part I had to do to make it work was the authentication. There's no native support for authenticating against FileMaker from Zapier. So basically what we did is we said, hey, if there's a session available, in other words, if this poll works and I can use that, I have a token and I can use it, then use it. If there's no token or it doesn't work, then then do this. And this is send a request to the authentication URL with the username and password stuff that we filled in earlier and get a token. And then every time you send anything, whether you're polling or collecting records or creating records, embed that as FM token inside your push. Really not much. All the rest of this garbage here is Zapier doesn't like to clear out its information, so it was still sending the username and password every time I was doing information, so I just wanted to null those out for each call. That's all that was, just a little cleanup. And there was a little bit of work, this was again a little teeny thing, we just had to parse records coming in to tell Zapier that they were record IDs, because FileMaker calls them result.recordID, and Zapier wanted results.id. Really not a big deal, but I'll point it out anyway, because that's what was involved. So all that scripting, and doesn't even look like that much anymore, but that's what that was all that was involved in setting up the API. So that's it for that. I'm going to just go and create two more examples. Go back to my Zaps. So that was from the form. I'm going to add now, I'm going to say anytime something's created inside FileMaker, when Zapier polls your FileMaker server for records, so it's going to get records. It's going to do that one with the sort. Zapier already knows about the whole staging server I just set up. It wants to make sure you at least have a record before I do it. It should find Bilbo Baggins. I'm thinking that was the last one. No, it was demo.devcon, that's right. So this is the information that it just pulled as a sample from FileMaker. So it actually really, you already saw a little activity there. It actually already went to FileMaker, grabbed my last record, and is displaying it to me. And now I'm going to go to this company called Drip, and I'm going to create a campaign, a Drip campaign, based on that user. And I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to say just a couple generic things. And that comes from the office email. Let's go find that. field data office email, right? And it's actually pulling stuff from the trigger that we set up. It's actually pulling stuff from the data record it collected from there. I also set up a first and a last in drip. And so I'm going to do that too. And this is FileMaker data, first and last. Now, I didn't even really go through, you saw like a couple little things on Zapier, but I mean, you can do, you can send text messages with Zapier. You can you can request PayPal payments. You can collect PayPal payments. You can send out invoices. You can connect to Slack, create channels, and create records on Slack. And it's just a slew of things that you can do. There's about, I think they said that at last count there was 380 or 390 or something different gateways that are connected to Slack. Sorry, connected to Zapier. Okay. And finish. This is going to be FM to Zap. And that's fine. Zap is on. Sorry, again, I did FM to Zap. Should be FM to drip, really. See it on my dashboard, FM to drip. OK, so those two are on. So we have these two commands saying, if I go to my form and I fill out a form, it'll end up in FileMaker. If I create a record in FileMaker, no matter how it got there, Zapier will find out about it and create a drip campaign. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to go to this, go to my form again. I'm just going to refresh it. I'm going to put in a new one. Can again. Demo devcon2 at. Okay, and submit. Okay, so I just submitted that form. Two things should happen. Well, actually, only one thing is really going to happen. I'll show you why. So inside FileMaker, I just created that record again. FileMaker devcon2 at Paradise Partners. I know you don't get a second applause because it already happened, but it's really still really cool. Now I'm going to go back to Zapier. And this trigger is set to run every 15 minutes. I don't know whether it's going to run. I'm not going to sit here 15 minutes twiddling my thumbs, so I'm actually going to run it. And it's going to go to FileMaker. It found there's one new record since I set it up. And it subscribed a drip campaign. And that's now I'm getting a drip campaign. Now, I don't know. I don't think this is really it. This would be surprising. No, that's not it. That's the one from demo at DevCon, not DevCon 2. So I'm going to remove that. I'm going to let it sit. Oh, I think I see one coming in. No. OK, it doesn't always happen that quick. It's a drip campaign, so they put it into a queue. So while that's happening, I'm just going to go into here. And I'm going to set up the third method so that you can see how that works, because I did want to cover a little bit of curl stuff. So I'm just going to go in here. I'm going to say FileMaker again. I'm going to say when records are received from a push script from FileMaker, I want to do something with it. So I'm going to save and continue. And I'm going to say I want to get, I'm going to get first. And this file is a slightly different format. I'll show you why. And email. And I'm going to continue. So it wasn't office email this time. It was a little bit different. OK, now it says, great. Grab this hook, just like we did with the other. Oh, look at that. I got my drip. Woo. Thank you. Now I lost my concentration. All right, so I'm going to go back in here. I'm going to go into a script. I'm going to look at the push Zapier. I'm going to set up my URL, and then I'll show you the rest of the script. I just want to get it out of the way so I don't forget and wonder why it didn't work. OK, so this script is really like 5 lines long. It could have been 1 line long if I didn't want to set up the variables to make it clear. That's the whole script. All I'm doing is I'm setting up a JSON object. So you can see the 3 variables that I set up in Zapier are first, last, and email. And so all I did was set up a JSON object with first, last, and email, and they're all JSON strings, and I pulled them from record data, right? That's all those variables are. And then the last piece is an insert from URL script step. It's going to go to the URL with the following curl options. It's going to set the data from $sign from the global variable JSON, which is the dictionary that I just set up. So it's saying send this dictionary along with your post request, and send it as content type application JSON. So when I run the script, and I'm not actually going to I'm not going to run a whole workflow based on this. I'm going to instead just show that it works. So I'm going to do, OK, I did this, and it's actually going to go out and it's going to try to find, oh, I didn't run it yet. It says waiting for a record. So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to run that script, and it looks like it's going to do demo devcon 2 because that's where I ran the script. Zapier is sitting there waiting for it to come in. Come on, Zapier. I gave me the right. There it is. OK. And there's my record, demo devcon 2. Came into Zapier, and now we can do anything we want with it because now it's in Zapier, and we can go in ahead. I'm not going to do all that, but we can go into ahead, set up another action. You know what? I'm not actually going to do it, but what I'm going to show you is just the sheer number of different apps. I'll just scroll through a couple of them. All right, they're not showing all of them. If you're looking for anything, right? If you're looking for Drip, you're looking for Facebook. I mean, there's just so many things that you can do with Zapier. So the next thing would be take an action and do something with that. You know, I can text it to myself or what have you. So that's it for the demo portion of this fun little show. So we created a record. We did get records, and we inserted from URL. Thank you. I know. Now I have like 3 minutes before Q&A. I wanted to leave some time. I figured people will have some questions. I'm hoping people have questions. So start thinking about your questions. There's a mic in the middle there, but I can take up another 5 minutes easy. OK, so security. The main thing to say about this is that REST has amped up the security a lot from earlier versions, and that's been a big focus of FileMaker, amping up security in FileMaker. You require an SSL certificate now with REST. You didn't require that with custom web publishing. And no data or passwords are ever sent in the URL. They're all sent in headers. Once you've exchanged it, you have a token that's a short-lived token, and that goes through all the transactions that you do with REST. So it added a lot of security, and you can also use OAuth for authentication. The advantage to that is that the OAuth providers can manage the password length encryption, password length or rotation or things like that. So that's the advantage of using something like OAuth. Anybody want to guess what that little graphic is? It's hysterical. You believe that? So these are the most common passwords. So security precautions. I just finished telling you, right, you're not sending passwords in the clear anymore. You're not, but you're still using them. It still is what accesses your data. I'm going to actually add to this list of security precautions. When you set up your account, use a unique account with a unique privilege set to do the REST functionality. There's no reason to use and give it just the permissions it needs to get to the data you need, right? In other words, set up a privilege set just for REST, set up a single user that uses that REST, and then you don't have to worry as much, at least, about people logging on with that username and password because they found it in the REST documentation, right? So I'm going to add that to this list that you just want to minimize. The whole bottom line here is you're on the internet now, right? We set up this whole peer system now. We're now a web service. So you're exposed. And so you want to make sure that you're keeping yourself secure. You want to make sure that you're looking at any place that you're vulnerable and tighten it up. So that's really the bottom line with that. So automation's awesome. Till it isn't. Let's take a look at our automation game again. I know we're like covering so many different like variables on this whole thing. So try to go from technical to sort of conceptual. So there was on the website, there was some service the customer wanted, and it wasn't spelled out as explicitly what it was. You just lost a sale, right? This is a game, okay? Drip ends up in spam. You go back a step, the credit card was rejected. Did you write your code to account for that? What I actually wanted to actually start talking about, though, are things like your reputation starts suffering because you didn't know the customer needed help at some point in this process, or you didn't know that they were getting frustrated. You got the customer angry, the job stalls, you went out of business, sorry. So there's different categories of things you want to think about, you want to consider when you're rolling out a system that you're automating. So we can set up a fully automated system. We can set up that system that really does every one of those pieces. We can do it using Zapier if we wanted to, and we can use it exactly the way we started doing it just now. What you want to consider are things like opportunities, lost opportunities, right? So where could you have held to the customer's hand and walked them through a process? Where did they get frustrated that you didn't know they got frustrated because you never had real communication with them? What kind of relationships are you building with your customer where it's all automated? Maybe it's great because it's all self-serve. Customers love that, but maybe they also got frustrated and something happened. You can program for failure, but I'm going to tell you something, failure is going to happen anyway, right? So it's a great idea to sort of set up these milestones, these key milestones where you have a human being checking that nothing went wrong, checking that the right documents were received, for example, or that something didn't get hung up for 3 weeks and you didn't notice. Right? Set up milestones, expectations that you can go and monitor. A human being can monitor that. And the other part was, the other category I was picking up on is changes in process or exceptions to process. We like to think that as developers, everything is like, yeah, follows this process, but I'm sure, especially those of us who have worked with many clients, those processes are never, you always have exceptions to those processes, and you always have rules that are broken, or something that changed slightly in the process that completely you had to change your programming for. So you can account for a lot of that, but again, having a human involved at key points keeps someone involved to make sure that, that things aren't off the rails. Great places to do that: onboarding new customers, confirming correct documents are received, cross-checking data at key points, following up with the customer after you're done, bonus points. Bottom line is automation should be treated as a complement to the production workflow, not a replacement. Let's take a look at that again. Really, I just like the pretty graphics. My partner Lauren made all those graphics, by the way. Right, so you sort of get the idea that if you start, those first ones were mostly technical, but as we start getting through this, maybe having a live chat on your website, a quality inspection, maybe a follow-up phone call at the end. Hey, you're not out of business anymore. Awesome. So FileMaker is an awesome hub for automation. REST provides some really powerful new tools with much better security. You still need to be mindful of the security risks, and you still want to really automate is awesome, except when it isn't. Just really be mindful of what you're automating and when you have a human involved in the automation. If you want to get your hands on this, you can go to the form. I'm going to warn you right now, you're going to get a drip. Until I turn that off. That's actually the form that we were working on just now, was anytime you go to that form, every time you go to that page and submit, it's going to do the whole thing we just did. So I'll remove at some point, but you'll get a drip. You can cancel it. Don't worry about it. SoSimpleSoftware.com/Zapier. If you also are on that website and you want to play around with the fmrest.php PHP class file, that's also on there. And you'll see a link on that page. The session will have minor updates. I'm not going to do, I'm really just going to take our current, the current presentation, because we modified it a little bit from what's up there, and we'll post that back up again. And thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. So there's a microphone right in the middle because they're recording this, and they want to make sure that anybody who has any questions, if you can come to the microphone, and I can do my best to answer them. Otherwise, we're going to end 10 minutes early, which won't look good. No questions? Who just said I got one? Oh, here's one. Yes, sir.
I was just curious if you had a integration from your value lists to the forms on Zapier. Like if you were to have a field that kind of pulled from a value list.
So you pull from a value list?
If you were to, like, I know you had a series of fields that could be transferred into a new record, and I was curious if you had any way to pull from a value list in your FileMaker solution into one of those fields so they could select from a value list rather than, say, typing it in. Let's say, for example.
I see. So it's almost like two-way. You're saying, let's create a value list in FileMaker and have that value list show in Zapier so that you can use it for form submission. No. No, and I'll tell you why, actually, because Zapier is designed as sort of a single direction transaction tool, as many of these are. So the form that you're seeing on the website is not actually impacted by FileMaker at all. It's a standalone form. And Zapier got wind of the fact that something changed on that form and sent it to FileMaker. So it's a single direction trigger response. It's not like actually connecting via an API.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And that's actually worth pointing out that this is not a replacement for full API integration because of that very fact. It's a single direction. Something happens, we're going to take an action. It can get very complex and take multiple actions and conditional actions, but it's still this single direction. Something happened, take an action. Yes, please.
So while the increase in security is nice in certain respects, there is some environments where perhaps you're not even connected to the internet and you're running something and you want to do something like Tableau integration. Do you see the requirement for an SSL cert for some servers that maybe don't even have a registered domain name as being too constrictive?
And well, as far as I understand, you can't actually do that, right? It needs to be, in order to connect to FileMaker, it needs to be publicly available, and it also needs to have a secure certificate.
Well, so yeah, it does need to, like you said, it requires an SSL certificate. But for certain environments, this makes it impossible to use the API. Right. I will say I have figured out a way around that.
You have or have not?
I have. Just like the admin console requires to run on HTTPS.
Yes.
Well, that's just a rule in Internet Information Services. You can disable that.
Okay.
And run it on your regular. Again, that's probably bad, but it does open that up for certain environments where maybe you're running it on or even for testing. Where
I mean, I would say it's a bad idea if you are opening, as long as you're inside a firewall and you have control over that. There's you're careful about it, that's cool, but as soon as you open up to the outside world, I would not even touch it if it's not secure.
Sure. Yeah.
Because you are sending
probably for anything like any of these public APIs.
Right.
Sometimes maybe if you had created your own or
and then, for vertical market integration, for example, or or custom tools you're connecting to. Yeah, it's great for that.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, sir.
I guess I'm not understanding the certificate requirement on REST and the data API, because the FileMaker Server now comes with its own testing certificate.
Right.
And that's not specific to your website.
Right.
I guess that's not good enough. And
that's not good enough. No, you really
to even experiment with this, one has to install a real certificate.
It's a really good question. Can you experiment this without doing a certificate? You know what? I honestly don't know offhand, so I don't want to miss answers. Does anybody know? Can you publish to REST without with the test certificate instead of installing your own?
Yes, you can, but most remote services won't accept it. They'll throw errors.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
The certificate that comes back is self-signed by FileMaker, so no external source will accept it.
Right. I'm actually repeat that because I have a microphone. It'll be recorded and stuff. But I gotcha. So what he's saying is that so just the same way if you're on the web browser and you type in a address and it has a self-signed certificate, you'll frequently get a warning saying this has a certificate, but there's something the matter with it. It's the same thing when you're calling it from Zapier or some other service. You're going to ping your FileMaker server, and it's going to say this is a self-signed certificate, and it either will warn you or flat out reject it, saying we're not going to let you use. We can't connect to this service because it's not a secure certificate. is not a legitimate one.
Gotcha.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you. I did a good job repeating you. We're good? Okay. Any other questions? Very cool. Guys, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thanks.